Tonight, I surrender my body to you, but you will kneel before my mother's forgiveness. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Before we begin, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. Your love and support mean everything to me. I know the last story wasn't my best, and I truly apologize for that. But we are human, and we grow through our mistakes. I promise to keep improving and bringing you the most passionate and heartfelt stories. Please accept my apology, and don't forget to like and comment on this video. Your support keeps me going. Now, let's start with love and a beautiful prayer for my beautiful family. A prayer for my beautiful family. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful family, for the love that unites us, and for the light that guides us. Bless each heart listening right now. Fill them with peace, joy, and unshakable faith. May their days be filled with laughter, their dreams with hope, and their lives with love. Protect them, Lord, from every storm, and lead them toward endless blessings. Let no sorrow dim their spirit, and no fear steal their joy. Surround them with kindness, strengthen them in moments of doubt, and remind them they are never alone, because your love is always with them. In Jesus' name, amen. My beautiful family, let's start this journey together with love. Like, comment, and let me know your thoughts. Now let's begin. The golden lighting of the grand ballroom at the Chicago Culinary Center cast an elegant glow over the assembled crowd of the city's gastronomic elite. Crystal glasses clinked as the melodic hum of excited conversation filled the air. It was the night of the prestigious Chicago Culinary Awards, an evening when reputations could be cemented or shattered with a single critique. Diana Lawrence smoothed the fabric of her navy blue cocktail dress, a modest yet elegant choice for the occasion. At 57, her face carried the gentle lines of a life spent in steaming kitchens, her hands bearing the subtle scars of decades wielding knives and surviving burns. Around her neck hung her mother's locket containing a small photograph of her late husband Michel and their daughter Sophia. Maison Diana is a finalist in the Heritage Excellence category, her sous chef Antoine reminded her with a gentle squeeze of her shoulder. After 30 years, you deserve this recognition. Chef? Diana offered a small smile, but remained silent. Recognition had never been her motivation. Maison Diana had been built on the foundations of her grandmother's recipes, carried across the ocean from a small village in Provence. Each dish was a story, a connection to a heritage that Diana had fought to preserve through decades of changing culinary trends. Across the room, Gabriel Morgan commanded attention without effort. At 37, his reputation as a culinary kingmaker preceded him. His restaurant investment firm had transformed struggling establishments into Michelin-starred destinations, and his critical palate was both revered and feared. Tall, with broad shoulders, his tailored charcoal suit emphasized a physique maintained through pre-dawn rowing sessions on Lake Michigan. Mr. Morgan, your prediction for tonight's heritage category? A journalist extended a digital recorder toward him. Gabriel took a measured sip of his champagne before responding. The culinary world is evolving rapidly. The establishments that understand this evolution, that honor tradition while embracing innovation, those are the ones worth watching. The ceremony proceeded with practiced elegance. When the Heritage Excellence category arrived, Diana's sous chef Antoine grasped her hand in anticipation. And the award goes to Osteria Ventura. Diana's expression never faltered as she applauded sincerely for her competitor. Disappointment was a familiar companion in a career spanning decades. The ceremony transitioned to its final segment, the Critics' Round Table, where the night's judges offered unscripted commentary. Gabriel Morgan, as head judge, took center stage. "We've seen remarkable technical execution tonight," he began, "but technical perfection without innovation is merely competent repetition." He gestured toward the Heritage Excellence finalists. Take Maison Diana, for instance. The coq au vin follows a recipe unchanged for generations. Authentic, yes, but refusing to acknowledge that cuisine, like all art forms, must evolve. The audience grew uncomfortably quiet. Public critiques were expected, but this felt unnecessarily pointed. When restaurants become museums, preserving dishes exactly as they were prepared decades ago, they risk becoming relics rather than living establishments. Authenticity that refuses to evolve becomes stagnation dressed as tradition. Diana remained perfectly still, her expression revealing nothing, even as Gabriel's words cut deeper than any kitchen knife she had wielded. The most successful heritage. Establishments understand that honoring tradition means allowing it to breathe and grow, not embalming it in outdated techniques and flavor profiles that no longer resonate with contemporary palates. As Gabriel continued, Diana quietly gathered her small clutch purse. With a gentle pat to Antoine's arm, she slipped away from their table and navigated toward the exit, moving with the same quiet efficiency that characterized her work in the kitchen. In the marble-floored foyer, Diana paused before a decorative mirror and studied her reflection. Behind the composed exterior, she saw what others could not. The young immigrant who had arrived in Chicago with nothing but her grandmother's recipes. The widow who had raised Sophia alone after Michelle's sudden death. The chef who had refused lucrative offers to commercialize her restaurant. "Chef Lawrence," a young server appeared. "Are you leaving? They haven't served the dessert course." Diana smiled warmly. "Some flavors become too bitter for even the finest palate, ma chérie. Please enjoy the rest of the evening." Outside, the April evening offered a gentle reprieve. Diana lifted her face to the cool breeze as she waited for her taxi. Chicago's skyline glittered against the night sky. A city that had adopted her, allowed her to preserve her heritage through her cooking, and given her daughter opportunities she herself had never known. As her taxi arrived, Diana cast one last glance at the culinary center. Inside, Gabriel Morgan continued holding court, unaware that his words had wounded more than professional pride. Diana settled into the taxi's back seat. "To Maison Diana, please," she instructed the driver. Tomorrow would bring the usual rhythm of morning preparations, the familiar comfort of flour on her hands, the meditative process of reducing stock to its essence. As the taxi pulled away, Diana opened her clutch and removed a small notebook. Inside was a new dessert recipe she'd been contemplating. Her grandmother's lavender crème brûlée, but with Sophia's suggested addition of honey infused with rosemary. Perhaps there was room for evolution after all, but on her terms, honoring the past while embracing the future her daughter represented. With quiet determination, Diana closed the notebook. Gabriel Morgan's critique would fade, like so many others before him. What would endure was what had always endured, the wisdom of generations, preserved and passed down with love, one carefully prepared dish at a time. Chapter 2. Sweet Beginnings. Midnight farmers' market beneath the Lake Street elevated tracks pulsed with a different energy than its daytime counterpart. Reserved exclusively for Chicago's culinary professionals, it operated in those magical hours when restaurants closed and chefs emerged from their kitchens, hungry for inspiration and rare ingredients that would never reach public markets. Strings of vintage bulbs cast a warm glow over the vendors' stalls. Sophia Lawrence navigated the market with practiced familiarity, her canvas tote bags already heavy with seasonal treasures. At 27, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had grown up in professional kitchens. As pastry chef at Eloise, one of Chicago's most innovative restaurants, She had developed a reputation for desserts that honored traditional techniques while introducing unexpected elements. "Last of the season," called out Farmer Ellis, holding up a bundle of chocolate mint. "Been saving it for you." Sophia smiled. "You're a lifesaver. I've been developing a chocolate ganache tart that needs exactly this." As she extended her hand for the herb bundle, another hand reached simultaneously, their fingers brushing in, a moment of unexpected contact. "I apologize," a deep voice interjected. "Please, you take it." Sophia looked up and found herself momentarily speechless. The man standing beside her was undeniably Gabriel Morgan, whose restaurants she had studied, and whose critiques had shaped industry standards. In person, he was taller than she expected, with an intensity to his hazel eyes that photographs failed to capture. "No, you first," she managed. "I can't claim to need it more than whatever three-star creation you're working on." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "That presumes I'm the one cooking, which betrays a dangerous assumption." He paid Farmer Ellis and then divided the bundle, offering her half. "Perhaps a compromise. I only need it for experimentation." Something in his manner, more humble than his public persona suggested, intrigued her. "Thank you. I'm Sophia." "Gabriel," he replied, omitting his surname as though testing whether she recognized him. She accepted the herbs with a smile that revealed she knew exactly who he was. "What brings Chicago's most influential restaurant investor to a midnight market instead of sending one of your executive chefs?" Gabriel's expression registered surprise, followed by appreciation for her directness. "I never invest in what I don't understand. These markets are where real cuisine begins, before the pretense, before the presentation." He gestured toward her tote bags. "And you? Those aren't ingredients for standard pastry menu items." "I'm developing something new." She hesitated, then added, "Something that bridges traditional pastry techniques with more contemporary flavor profiles." Interest sparked in his eyes. "That's precisely the evolution that keeps cuisine alive." He checked his watch. "I'd love to hear more, but I have other vendors to visit before they close." "Unless you'd consider continuing this conversation elsewhere. There's a 24-hour coffee shop on Randolph that most industry people know." The invitation hovered between them, unexpected and intriguing. "I know the place. Give me 20 minutes to finish here." "I'll be there," Gabriel replied with a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. 90 minutes later, their coffee cups sat empty as their conversation continued to flow. What had begun as professional curiosity had evolved into a wide-ranging discussion about everything from childhood food memories to the philosophical implications of molecular gastronomy. "So your mother never wanted you to join the restaurant?" "Business?" Gabriel asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Sophia traced the rim of her cup. "She wanted me to have choices she never had. When she came to America, cooking was her only marketable skill. She sent me to university for business, but I kept returning to the kitchen. Eventually, she recognized it wasn't her path I was following, but my own." "And now you're at Eloise, pushing boundaries she never could," Gabriel observed. Something in his tone made Sophia pause. "That's not exactly right. My mother isn't opposed to innovation. She simply believes that before you can deconstruct tradition, you must first master it." Gabriel's expression grew thoughtful, a wisdom many contemporary chefs never grasp. He glanced at his watch. "It's nearly 3. I've kept you far too long." "Oh, didn't notice the time," Sophia admitted. Outside, the summer night had cooled. They stood awkwardly until Gabriel broke the silence. "I'd like to cook for you," he said directly. "Not at a restaurant. At my home. I have a rooftop garden where I test concepts before implementing them in my restaurants." The invitation was unusual enough to be intriguing. Professional chefs rarely cooked for each other outside of structured events. It was an intimate gesture. "Just to be clear," Sophia replied with a hint of amusement, "is this a professional exchange or something else?" Gabriel's smile reached his eyes. "I believe it could be both, if you're amenable. Tomorrow evening?" 3 evenings later, Sophia stepped onto Gabriel's rooftop terrace and momentarily lost her practiced composure. The Chicago skyline created a breathtaking backdrop for an intimate garden oasis. Raised beds overflowed with herbs and edible flowers, a small outdoor kitchen occupied one corner, and in the center, a table for two had been set with understated elegance. The 7-course tasting menu that followed revealed a side of Gabriel Morgan that few in the culinary world ever witnessed. Each dish told a story of personal connection to ingredients and memory. Between courses, they traded stories of culinary disasters and triumphs. As Gabriel served a delicate lavender and honey panna cotta, he admitted, "I researched you before tonight. Your work at Eloise is remarkable, particularly your revival of traditional French pastry techniques with contemporary applications." "Should I be flattered or concerned that you investigated me?" Sophia asked, taking a bite of the dessert. "Both, perhaps," he acknowledged with disarming honesty. "I wanted to prepare dishes that would speak to your particular sensibility." As the evening progressed, they moved to a small seating area near the garden's edge. Gabriel spoke of growing up in a household where food was fuel rather than celebration. Sophia shared her childhood memories of falling asleep to the rhythm of her mother's knife on a cutting board. The night air cooled, and Gabriel draped a soft blanket around Sophia's shoulders. The gesture brought them physically closer, and the conversation gradually gave way to comfortable silence as they watched the city lights below. When Gabriel turned to her, the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I would very much like to kiss you," he said, "but I want to be clear about my intentions. This isn't a casual interest for me." The directness of his statement was startling in its vulnerability. Sophia studied his face, seeing beyond the successful entrepreneur to the man beneath. "I'm not interested in casual either," she replied softly. When their lips met, it was with the patient exploration of two people discovering something precious and unexpected. His hand cradled her face with surprising gentleness, and when they parted, the look they exchanged acknowledged a threshold crossed. Later, as they swayed to soft jazz beneath the string lights, her head resting against his chest, Sophia reflected on the strange serendipity of their meeting. In an industry filled with brief connections and professional rivalries, they had somehow found this moment of genuine understanding. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel murmured against her hair. Sophia smiled. "That some of the best recipes come from unexpected combinations." His arms tightened around her, and in the garden above the city, surrounded by herbs and flowers that would eventually become ingredients in meals yet to be created, they continued their dance. The first careful steps in a relationship neither had anticipated, but both were increasingly certain they wanted to explore. Chapter 3. Simmering Attraction. Morning light filtered through the wide windows of Gabriel's lake house, casting golden patterns across rumpled white sheets. Sophia stretched languidly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, until the events of the previous evening came rushing back. Their impulsive decision to drive to Michigan after Friday dinner service had resulted in a midnight arrival at Gabriel's secluded property. She slipped from bed, wrapping herself in his discarded shirt before padding to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view stole her breath. A pristine stretch of Lake Michigan shore, framed by towering pines and maples beginning their autumn transformation. The lake itself stretched toward the horizon, its surface glittering with early light. "I thought I might find you here." Gabriel's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms encircling her waist. "I've always believed this view justifies every minute of the drive." Sophia leaned back against his chest, savoring the solidity of him. "It's perfect. I can see why you escape here to think." 2 months into their relationship, they had fallen into a rhythm that accommodated their demanding schedules. Late dinners after service, occasional breakfasts before markets, text messages exchanged during rare quiet moments in their respective kitchens. But this was their first true escape together, a full weekend insulated from professional demands. "I have plans for us," Gabriel murmured against her neck, starting with breakfast. In the kitchen, they moved with the synchronized rhythm of professionals accustomed to shared workspace. Gabriel handled the savory elements, softly scrambled eggs with fresh herbs, smoked salmon he'd cured himself, while Sophia prepared delicate crepes infused with orange blossom water. No words were needed as they passed utensils, anticipated movements, created space for each other in the choreography of cooking. Over breakfast on the deck, Gabriel revealed his plans for the day. "I've been developing a new concept for the riverside location," he explained, his excitement evident in the animation of his typically composed features. "A menu that evolves with each course, telling a story through flavor progression. I thought we might experiment together." Sophia felt a flutter of professional excitement. Gabriel rarely invited collaboration in his creative process. "What's the narrative you're building?" "The journey of ingredients from their origin to transformation," he replied, reaching for her hand across the table. "With your background in pastry science and my focus on savory progression, we might create something neither of us could develop independently." They spent the morning foraging along the property's edge, wild mushrooms from beneath century-old trees, late season, berries that had survived the first frost, edible flowers and herbs that had self-seeded from Gabriel's garden. Each discovery was accompanied by spirited debate about preparation methods, flavor balances, presentation possibilities. By afternoon, the kitchen had transformed into a laboratory of culinary experimentation. Gabriel had opened bottles of wine that complemented their evolving menu, and they sipped as they worked, the creative process increasingly fluid as the day progressed. Sophia found herself adapting techniques she typically reserved for pastry to Gabriel's savory preparations, while he introduced her to flavor combinations she'd never considered. "Try this," he offered, holding a spoon of reduction to her lips. The complex flavor bloomed across her palate, deeply savory, with an unexpected floral note at the finish. "Lavender," she guessed, closing her eyes to focus on the subtlety. "My grandmother's secret ingredient in coq au vin," he confirmed. "She was from Provence originally." Sophia opened her eyes in surprise. "My mother's family too. She uses lavender in her—" She stopped abruptly, an uncomfortable awareness suddenly intruding on their perfect day. In 2 months of dating, she had carefully avoided mentioning her mother's restaurant or even her full name to Gabriel. The memory of his public criticism still stung, and she feared its disclosure would introduce complications to their otherwise harmonious connection. "In her what?" Gabriel prompted, unaware of her inner turmoil. "In her cooking," Sophia finished vaguely. "A family tradition." Gabriel studied her face, sensing the shift in her mood. "You rarely speak of your family," he observed. "Have I touched on something painful?" Sophia shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just kitchen confidentiality. Family. Recipes are sacred territory." He accepted her deflection with grace, returning to their culinary experiment. As the afternoon light softened into evening, they completed their menu development with a final tasting. 7 courses that told the story of transformation, raw ingredients yielding to heat, time, and technique to become something greater than their individual components. We make a remarkable team, Gabriel observed as they finished the final bite of Sophia's wild berry clafouti with herbs from their morning forage. Your approach complements mine in ways I wouldn't have anticipated. Sophia felt a warm glow that transcended the wine they'd shared. It's rare to find someone who speaks the same culinary language, she admitted. Most men I've dated couldn't understand why I'd want to discuss fermentation techniques over dinner. Gabriel laughed, the sound relaxed and genuine. Most women I've dated expected me to leave work at the restaurant door, he countered. As though passion could be compartmentalized. They cleared the kitchen in comfortable silence, the satisfaction of creative collaboration lingering between them. As twilight descended, Gabriel suggested they take wine to the shore. They walked hand in hand down a winding path to a small, private beach, where Gabriel had arranged a simple arrangement. A large blanket spread on the sand, lanterns providing gentle illumination against the gathering darkness. You planned this, Sophia observed with a smile. I hoped, he corrected, drawing her close as they settled onto the blanket, though I didn't anticipate how perfectly the day would unfold. The conversation deepened as night fell completely, stars emerging in brilliant clarity away from city lights. Gabriel spoke of his childhood in Detroit, where his father's factory, job and mother's nursing shifts left little time for family meals. Food had been functional rather than celebratory. His exposure to cuisine, coming only after a college scholarship, introduced him to a wider world. I was studying economics when I took a semester in France, he explained, his voice softening. With memory, the first time I experienced a true French meal, 5 hours, multiple courses, conversation flowing with the wine, it was an epiphany. I realized food wasn't just sustenance, it was connection, history, culture. Sophia watched, his face as he spoke, struck by how this vulnerability transformed his features. The sharp angles softened, the penetrating gaze turned inward to memory. You gave up economics for restaurants, she prompted gently. Eventually, he nodded. First came apprenticeships during university breaks, then a position with a restaurant, investment group after graduation. I learned the business side before fully embracing the culinary aspect. He turned to her, genuine curiosity in his expression. And you? Was it always a foregone conclusion you'd follow your mother into cooking? Sophia considered the question seriously. I resisted initially, studied business management, even took a corporate job after graduation. She smiled at the memory. Lasted 8 months before I realized I was spending every evening and weekend in my mother's kitchen, happier there than in any boardroom. She must be proud to see you forging your own path now, Gabriel observed. A complicated emotion flickered across Sophia's features. She worries sometimes that I'll lose connection to our heritage in pursuit of innovation, she admitted, but she's supportive. She understands that preserving tradition sometimes means allowing it to evolve. Gabriel studied her expression. In the lantern light. There's more you're not saying, he observed quietly. Something's troubling you when you speak of her. Sophia shook her head, unwilling to introduce the shadow of his critique into their perfect weekend. Just the eternal tension between generations, she deflected. Surely your parents had reservations about your career path as well. He accepted her redirection with a small nod, though his eyes reflected awareness of her evasion. My father considered restaurant work beneath my education, he acknowledged. He came around eventually, once success provided external validation. The conversation gradually yielded to more immediate sensations, the sound of waves against the shore, the cooling night air, the warmth between them as they moved closer on the blanket. When Gabriel's lips found hers, the kiss carried a different quality than those they'd shared before, deeper, more certain, infused with the intimacy of shared creativity and vulnerability. Their lovemaking on the beach blanket began with the same measured exploration that had characterized their collaboration in the kitchen, attentive to response, building flavors that complemented rather than competed. But as passion intensified, a new urgency emerged between them. Gabriel whispered her name against her skin as though it were an incantation, and Sophia surrendered to the overwhelmingly sensory experience, the coarse texture of the blanket. Beneath her, the cool night air against heated skin, the gentle rhythm of waves providing counterpoint to their movements. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath a second blanket Gabriel had thoughtfully brought, watching stars wheel slowly overhead. The comfortable silence between them felt significant, a recognition that their connection had deepened beyond the professional admiration and physical attraction that had initially drawn them together. "I'm falling in love with you," Gabriel said quietly, the words hanging in the night air with perfect clarity. "I don't say that lightly or often." Sophia turned to study his face, finding none of his usual guardedness. In that moment of complete openness, she allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been feeling for weeks. "I'm falling in love with you too," she replied. The admission, both frightening and liberating, "and that terrifies me." "Why?" His question was gentle, his hand stroking her hair as they faced each other in the lantern light. "Because it wasn't part of my plan," she admitted with a small smile. "Because professional relationships are so much more predictable than personal. And because loving someone means being vulnerable in ways that are harder to control than perfecting a souffle technique." Gabriel laughed softly, the sound rumbling through his chest where her head now rested. "The best recipes are often discovered rather than planned," he reminded her, echoing her words from their first evening together, "and contain elements of risk." As the night deepened around them, they spoke of smaller things, favorite books, childhood memories, travel destinations they hoped to share. Eventually, they gathered their things and walked back to the house, where they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the sound of the lake a gentle lullaby outside the windows. Morning found them back in the kitchen, creating breakfast together, with the same wordless coordination that had characterized their collaboration the previous day. As Sophia whipped cream for their coffee, she found herself studying Gabriel, his focused expression as he perfectly cooked eggs, his instinctive reach for herbs without measuring, the occasional glance in her direction that carried a new warmth. Since their declarations the night before, something had shifted between them, a deepening that transcended physical intimacy or professional respect. Together they had created not just memorable cuisine, but a connection that felt increasingly essential. As Gabriel caught her watching him and smiled, a private smile meant only for her, Sophia felt a bittersweet ache beneath her happiness. Sooner or later, she would need to tell him about her mother's restaurant and his unknowing role in her family's story. But not today, she decided, returning his smile and accepting the perfectly prepared plate he offered. Today was for savoring what they had discovered, in the kitchen, on the shore, and in the growing certainty that their lives had changed irrevocably, since their hands touched reaching for the same herb bundle in a midnight market. Chapter 4. Unexpected Ingredients. The first signs of illness crept up on Sophia gradually. What began as fatigue after a demanding week at Eloise progressed to a persistent headache that kitchen lights intensified. By Saturday's dinner service end, her skin had taken on an unnatural pallor that even her sous chef noticed. "You should go home," Jerome insisted, removing a piping bag from her trembling hands. "Whatever this is, you're not doing anyone favors by spreading it." Sophia wanted to protest, but lacked the energy. Her limbs felt impossibly heavy, her mind foggy. "The chocolate order for tomorrow," she began weakly. "I'll handle it," Jerome cut her off firmly. "Chef's orders. Go home, get into bed, and don't come back until you're not a walking health violation." The taxi ride to her Wicker Park apartment passed in a blur of feverish discomfort. By the time she unlocked her door, chills had set in beneath her chef's coat. She managed to send Gabriel a brief text, cancelling their dinner plans before collapsing. Fully clothed onto her bed, too exhausted to even remove her shoes, the noise of knocking pulled her from fitful sleep hours later. Disoriented, she squinted at her bedside clock, 11:43 p.m. The knocking continued, more insistent. "Sophia?" Gabriel's voice penetrated her fog. "Are you all right?" With tremendous effort, she pushed herself upright, the room tilting alarmingly, as she made her way to the door. When she pulled it open, Gabriel's expression shifted instantly from concern to alarm. "My God," he said softly, stepping inside. His cool hand pressed against her forehead. "You're burning up." "It's just a flu," she managed, her voice raspy. "I'll be fine after some sleep." Gabriel guided her back toward the bedroom, his arm supporting her waist. "You should have called me," he murmured, helping her sit on the bed's edge. "I brought soup, but I see you need more than that." Through her fever haze, Sophia registered the insulated bag he'd set on her nightstand. "You made soup? Chicken broth with ginger and lemongrass," he confirmed, kneeling to remove her shoes. "But first, we need to get you comfortable and bring down this fever." What followed was care, unlike any Sophia had experienced since childhood. Gabriel moved through her small apartment with quiet efficiency, locating acetaminophen in her bathroom cabinet, filling a glass with water, finding clean pajamas in her dresser. His hands were gentle as he helped her change, clinically matter-of-fact, despite the intimacy of the gesture. When she was settled back against her pillows, he returned with a cool, damp cloth that he placed on her forehead. "You don't have to stay," she protested weakly. "It's just a flu. I don't want you catching it." Gabriel's response was to pull a chair beside her bed. "I've already been exposed if it's contagious," he reasoned, "and you're in no condition to care for yourself properly." Too exhausted to argue, Sophia surrendered to his ministrations. Gabriel heated the soup, helping her sit up to sip small spoonfuls, his free hand supporting her back. Between sips, he spoke of inconsequential things: a new supplier of heirloom vegetables, plans for winter menu changes, a book about food rituals he'd been reading. His voice washed over her like a comforting tide, requiring nothing beyond her presence. When the soup was finished, he helped her lie back down, replacing the cloth on her forehead with a fresh one. "Sleep now," he encouraged softly. "I'll be here if you need anything." Sophia drifted into fever dreams, occasionally surfacing to find Gabriel still present, sometimes reading by the dim light of her bedside lamp, sometimes adjusting her covers or offering water. Once she woke to find him gently applying a cool cloth to her wrists and neck. "You're still here," she murmured in surprise. His smile was tender. "Where else would I be?" Morning arrived with watery sunlight filtering through her blinds and the unexpected aroma of coffee and toast. Sophia opened her eyes to find her fever had broken during the night, leaving her weak but clear-headed. She managed to sit up, running a hand through her tangled hair. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, a tray in his hands. "You look more human," he observed with relief. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been hit by a delivery truck," she admitted, but no longer delirious. "You stayed all night?" The realization was both touching and mildly embarrassing. He set the tray across her lap, toast with her favorite apricot preserves, a soft-boiled egg, and a small bowl of fresh berries. The care evident in this simple meal moved her unexpectedly. "I have found something else while you were sleeping," Gabriel said, retrieving a weathered book from her nightstand. "Your mother's cookbook?" Sophia tensed slightly, seeing the worn copy of Diana Lawrence's self-published collection of family recipes. She'd forgotten it was there. She often consulted it when developing new desserts. finding inspiration in her heritage. Yes, she answered carefully. Family recipes, mostly. Gabriel opened it reverently, running his fingers over the handwritten notes in the margins. These annotations are fascinating. The way she adjusts techniques based on seasonal humidity, the substitutions for American ingredients. He looked up with genuine admiration. This isn't just cooking, it's culinary anthropology. Your mother must be remarkable. The knot in Sophia's stomach tightened. The moment to reveal her mother's identity and Gabriel's unknowing role in wounding her hovered between them. But looking at Gabriel's earnest appreciation of the cookbook and remembering his tender care throughout the night, she couldn't bear to introduce that complication into this perfect moment of connection. She is, Sophia agreed simply. She taught me everything fundamental about food. Gabriel settled back in the chair, the cookbook open on his lap. Would you mind if I read to you? When I was sick as a child, my grandmother would read me stories. It always made me feel better. The unexpected vulnerability in this admission touched her deeply. I'd like that. For the next hour, Gabriel read from Diana's cookbook, not just ingredients and methods, but the stories her mother had included with each recipe. His voice gave new life to tales Sophia had known since childhood, how her grandmother had taught her mother to make cassoulet during the harsh winter of 1963, how her great-aunt had smuggled the family's sourdough starter out of France during the war, how a mistranslated recipe had accidentally created their family's unique version of tarte tatin. Watching him engage so respectfully with her heritage, Sophia felt herself falling deeper in love with him. This care he showed wasn't performative or calculated. It was an authentic expression of who he was beneath the professional exterior most people saw. By afternoon, Sophia felt strong enough to move to the living room sofa. Gabriel prepared a light lunch of the soup he'd brought, now enhanced with fresh herbs from her windowsill garden. As they ate, he kept the conversation deliberately light, sensing her need for mental as well as physical recovery. I need to confess something, Gabriel said as he cleared their dishes. I took the liberty of calling Jerome at Eloise this morning to let him know you won't be in tomorrow. He said your station is covered through Wednesday. Rather than feeling her autonomy had been infringed upon, Sophia felt a wave of gratitude. Thank you. I wouldn't have thought to do that until it was too late. Gabriel returned to sit beside her, lifting her feet onto his lap with casual intimacy. I've been thinking about what you said regarding your mother's approach to tradition, he said, absently massaging her feet as he spoke. About how preservation sometimes requires evolution. Sophia tensed slightly. Oh. It's made me reconsider some of my more rigid positions on culinary tradition, he continued, unaware of her discomfort. I've perhaps been too quick to dismiss establishments that prioritize heritage over innovation. The irony of his statement was almost physically painful. If only he knew he was specifically referencing her mother's restaurant, the very establishment he had publicly criticized. That's an interesting evolution in your thinking, she managed. Gabriel smiled ruefully. I can be unnecessarily dogmatic in my critiques sometimes. It's something I'm working on, seeing the value in approaches different from my own. He gave her foot a gentle squeeze. Your influence, I suspect. Evening fell with a gentle rain pattering against the windows. Gabriel prepared a simple dinner that they ate side by side on the sofa, watching an old Julia Child episode that had them both laughing at her unfiltered commentary. The domesticity of the moment struck Sophia. How natural it felt to share this quiet evening, how effortlessly they had moved from professional admiration to physical passion to this deeper intimacy of caring for one another. Stay tonight? she asked when the program ended, suddenly not wanting to be alone. Gabriel kissed her forehead, his lips lingering against her skin. "I was planning to," he admitted, "but I'll be on the sofa. You need proper rest." Despite her protests, he was firm on this point. He helped her back to bed, bringing fresh water and medication for the night. Before leaving her to sleep, he placed her mother's cookbook on the nightstand. "I bookmarked the lavender honey madeleines," he said. "When you're feeling better, perhaps we could make them together." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat. Those madeleines were her childhood favorite, the treat her mother made whenever she was sick or sad. That Gabriel had somehow intuited their significance touched her deeply. "I'd like that," she whispered. After he left the room, Sophia reached for the cookbook, finding the page Gabriel had marked. There, in her mother's handwriting, was the notation that always accompanied this recipe. "Pour ma petite Sophia," a reminder that sweetness follows difficulty. Closing the book, Sophia felt the weight of her unspoken truth. Sooner or later, she would need to tell Gabriel about her mother's identity and his unwitting role in hurting her. But tonight, drifting towards sleep with the knowledge that he was just in the next room, keeping watch, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility that her mother's wisdom might apply to this situation as well, that sweetness could indeed follow difficulty if approached with courage and honesty. In the living room, Gabriel settled on the sofa with a blanket, his laptop open to review reports from his restaurants. Yet his attention kept drifting to the bedroom door, his thoughts not on profit margins or inventory, but on the woman sleeping beyond that threshold. Her vulnerability had revealed something to him, not weakness, but a new dimension of strength. In caring for her, he had discovered parts of himself long neglected. He closed the laptop, listening to the rain against the windows and the occasional soft sounds from the bedroom. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't remember the last time he had felt this content, this centered. The realization both comforted and unsettled him. How swiftly this woman had become essential to his sense of wholeness. How completely she had rearranged his priorities without either of them quite noticing it happen. Chapter 5. The Moment of Truth. Maison Diana glowed from within on its 25th anniversary evening, transformed by arrangements of deep burgundy and cream dahlias that echoed the colors from its opening night a quarter-century before. Candlelight danced across polished stemware, catching in the crystal like captured stars as Diana moved through her domain with the quiet grace that had become her hallmark. In the kitchen, Diana's silver-streaked hair was secured beneath an immaculate chef's cap as she called orders with the gentle authority that had earned her staff's lifelong loyalty. Her hands moved with the precise confidence of someone who had performed these motions thousands of times, yet approached each dish with reverent attention. "Mama, we're completely full tonight," Sophia whispered, slipping between bustling staff members after arriving from Eloise. She had arranged to work a shortened shift to help with the celebration's dessert service. "People are waiting outside just to be part of this moment." Diana's smile softened the fine lines around her eyes as she briefly embraced her daughter. "Your father would have loved to see this," she said softly. "He always believed in what we were building here." Sophia inhaled her mother's familiar scent, butter, herbs, and the lavender soap she had used since Sophia's childhood. "He would be proudest of you," she replied, "for preserving what matters while still finding ways to move forward." A shadow flickered across Diana's features. "I sometimes wonder if I've moved forward enough. That critic at the awards ceremony." She stopped herself, brushing flour from her hands with a decisive gesture. "Tonight is for celebration, not for dwelling on harsh words." Sophia felt the familiar twist of unease at this reference to Gabriel. Through 3 months of deepening intimacy with him, she had maintained careful separation between her growing love and her family loyalty. Neither Gabriel nor her mother knew how completely their lives had already intersected through her. The dining room hummed with anticipation as guests were seated. Sophia moved among tables, greeting patrons who had celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and milestones at Maison Diana since she was a child. The restaurant had never sought to impress with trends or spectacle. Its quiet elegance came from authenticity, from dishes prepared with ingredients that spoke of place and history. As she prepared to depart for her shift at Eloise, a particular quality of movement near the entrance caught her attention. Her heart performed a complicated maneuver, part joy, part panic, as she recognized Gabriel's distinctive silhouette as he spoke with the maître d'. He hadn't seen her yet, his attention focused on checking in for what was evidently a reservation. Before she could retreat to the kitchen safety, Gabriel turned and spotted her. Surprise brightened his features as he moved toward her with the fluid confidence that had first drawn her attention at the midnight market. "Sophia!" His voice carried pleasure and confusion. "What are you doing here? I thought you were at Eloise tonight." She fought to maintain composure as he leaned in to kiss her cheek, his familiar scent of cedar and bergamot now incongruous in her mother's domain. "I'm heading there shortly," she managed, "just helping with some preparations first." Gabriel smiled, clearly delighted by the coincidence. "I've been trying for weeks to secure a reservation. The traditional French cuisine here is legendary, and tonight's anniversary menu was too remarkable to miss." Before Sophia could formulate a response, a voice she had known since before memory spoke from behind her. "Sophia, Antoine needs to confirm the timing for—" Diana stopped abruptly as she emerged from the kitchen, her eyes meeting Gabriel's. The recognition was immediate, electric, and mutual. Sophia watched as emotions cascaded across her mother's face, shock, hurt, and finally a composed neutrality that concealed everything but dignity. "Monsieur Morgan," Diana said with perfect politeness, her accent more pronounced under stress. "Welcome to Maison Diana." The three stood suspended in a tableau of revelation. Sophia felt caught in the gravitational pull between two fixed stars of her universe, witnessing the exact moment understanding dawned in Gabriel's expression. "You know each other?" he asked. Then comprehension transformed his features as connections assembled themselves. "Diana Lawrence, you're Sophia's mother." The silence that followed felt tangible, as though time itself had paused to acknowledge the significance of this collision of worlds. Diana's eyes found her daughter's with a question that allowed no evasion. "Sophia, you know this man?" The carefully controlled tone couldn't quite mask the hurt beneath. Gabriel turned to her, realization continuing to reshape his features. "You're Diana's daughter," he said softly. "All this time, and you never mentioned—" Before Sophia could bridge the sudden chasm between them, Diana recovered her professional poise. With a grace that broke Sophia's heart, her mother simply said, "Please enjoy your evening, Monsieur Morgan. Tonight's menu features several classics from our opening year." With a barely perceptible nod to her daughter, she retreated to the kitchen, her posture betraying nothing of what Sophia knew must be devastating hurt. In the kitchen sanctuary, away from curious eyes, Sophia found her mother meticulously inspecting a row of plates. "Mama," she began, her voice catching. Diana raised one hand without turning. "Not now, ma chérie. We have a dining room full of guests celebrating our milestone." When she finally faced her daughter, her expression was composed, though her eyes revealed deeper waters. "You have a shift at Eloise. We will speak later. I'll be back for dessert service," Sophia promised, aching to explain but respecting her mother's wish to maintain professionalism. As she returned to the dining room, Sophia found Gabriel already gone. Antoine mentioned that the gentleman dining alone had left after declining to order, asking only for his check. The night passed in a blur of professional obligations. When the last guest departed and the final surfaces gleamed clean, Diana finally addressed what had happened. 3 months, Diana said quietly. Not a question, but a realization as she pieced together the timeline. Since the midnight market. Yes, Sophia admitted, feeling both relief and dread as the carefully separated hemispheres of her life finally converged. I didn't know how to tell you, and then the longer I waited, the more impossible it seemed, Diana finished for her. She studied her daughter's face with the perception that had always seen through childhood fabrications. And he didn't know about our connection? No, Sophia answered quickly. He came tonight out of genuine interest in the restaurant. He had no idea. Diana nodded slowly, something like relief softening her features. Then it wasn't calculation, at least, not deliberate cruelty. Gabriel isn't cruel, Sophia defended instinctively. He's passionate about food, sometimes to the point of forgetting there are people behind the plates, but he's not what? Diana interrupted gently. Not the man who stood before hundreds of our peers and used my life's work as an example of culinary stagnation. Sophia fell silent, having no defense against this truth. Diana sighed, her anger seeming to fade into something more complex. I don't question your judgment of his character, ma chérie. You have always seen people clearly, but I wonder if you understand what it means to build something over decades, only to have it dismissed by someone who never bothered to understand its purpose. I do understand, Sophia said quietly. That's why I never told him. I was afraid of losing him, but I was more afraid of betraying you. Diana took her daughter's hands, her chef's fingers strong and sure against Sophia's pastry-refined ones. Love is never a betrayal, she said with unexpected gentleness. But secrets can wound more deeply than honesty. When Sophia finally arrived home, she found an envelope beneath her door. Inside was a note in Gabriel's distinctive handwriting. Sophia, I didn't know. I'm sorry for everything. Gabriel. She traced the words, feeling their simplicity, against the complex tapestry of emotions that now lay between them. In the quiet of her apartment, she finally allowed the tears that had been building all evening, not just for the pain of the present moment, but for the months of divided loyalty that had preceded it. Dawn was breaking as she finally fell asleep, exhausted by emotion, but somehow lighter for having the truth, however painfully, finally exposed. The separate worlds she had so carefully maintained had collided, leaving wreckage, but also the possibility of building something more authentic from the fragments. Chapter 6. Paths Forward. The week following the disastrous revelation at Maison, Diana's anniversary celebration unfolded in a fog of uncertainty. Sophia threw herself into experimental pastry development at Eloise, working punishing hours that left little time for reflection. Her team exchanged concerned glances when she arrived before dawn, and remained well after service concluded, her usual creative spark replaced by a mechanical precision that produced flawless but somehow soulless desserts. At home, Gabriel's handwritten note sat on her kitchen counter, its simple message, I didn't know, I'm sorry, for everything, offering neither resolution nor a clear path forward. She had drafted dozens of responses on her phone, deleting each before sending. On Thursday evening, an unexpected text from her mother broke through the emotional stalemate. Come for dinner tomorrow, just us. Diana's apartment above Maison. Diana had always been Sophia's sanctuary in times of trouble. The small space reflected her mother's essence, unfussy elegance, carefully chosen quality over quantity, and the subtle scent of herbs that seemed permanently infused in the walls. Diana greeted her with the customary kiss on both cheeks, as though nothing had changed between them. "You look exhausted," Diana observed, leading Sophia to the modest dining table already set for two. "Jerome tells me you've been at Eloise since 4 a.m. every day this week." Sophia managed a weak smile. "You've been checking up on me." "A mother's prerogative," Diana replied, bringing a simple but exquisite coq au vin to the table, the original family recipe, not the refined version. Served at the restaurant, comfort food, prepared with the same care Diana might have offered for a physical illness. They ate in companionable silence for several minutes, the familiar flavors wrapping Sophia in memories of childhood dinners after difficult days at school. Only when they had finished the main course did Diana finally address what hovered between them. "He came to the restaurant yesterday morning," she said, refilling their wine glasses. Sophia's head jerked up in surprise. "Gabriel was here. You didn't tell me." "I'm telling you now," Diana replied with characteristic calm. "He didn't come inside, just left a letter and a small package at the door before we opened." From her apron pocket, Diana withdrew an envelope. It's high-quality paper bearing Gabriel's distinctive handwriting. "I thought you might want to read it." Sophia accepted the envelope with uncertain hands. "You've read it?" "It was addressed to me," Diana pointed out, rising to clear their plates and bring dessert from the kitchen. Left alone momentarily, Sophia carefully removed the letter from its envelope, her pulse quickening as she recognized Gabriel's handwriting, Chef Lawrence. "Words of apology seem inadequate against the harm my careless critique caused to both your professional reputation and your relationship with your daughter. I offer them nonetheless, not expecting forgiveness, but because acknowledging truth is the only honorable response to my unconscionable lapse in judgment." My comments at the awards ceremony reflected not just professional arrogance, but personal blindness to the profound importance of preserving culinary heritage. In the month since meeting Sophia, I have come to understand how tradition and innovation can, indeed must, coexist for cuisine to remain both meaningful and relevant. I recognize now that what I dismissed as resistance to evolution was actually something far more valuable, a commitment to preserving cultural knowledge that connects generations and honors the wisdom of those who came before us. The attached book was my grandmother's. Her notations in the margins regarding traditional techniques from her childhood in Lyon are the only connection I have to my own culinary heritage, one I nearly dismissed in my rush toward constant innovation. I share it not as a presumptuous attempt at equivalence, but as evidence that I understand, at least partially, the value of what you have built at Maison Diana. With profound respect and sincere regret, Buck Gabriel Morgan. When Diana returned with 2 perfect îles flottantes, the meringue islands floating on crème anglaise had been Sophia's favorite childhood dessert, she found her daughter wiping tears with the back of her hand. "He seems sincere," Diana observed, setting the desserts down without comment on Sophia's emotional response. "He is," Sophia confirmed, carefully refolding the letter. What was in the package? Diana crossed to a small bookshelf and retrieved a worn, leather-bound volume, clearly decades old, its spine cracked with use. A first-edition Escoffier, with his grandmother's annotations throughout, not something one parts with lightly. The gesture's significance wasn't lost on either woman. In their world, family recipes and cooking references were sacred texts, repositories of not just techniques but memories and connections to those long gone. "What will you do?" Sophia asked, the question encompassing far more than just Gabriel's gift. Diana considered her response carefully, stirring her dessert with deliberate movements. I believe people reveal their true character not in moments of success, but in how they respond to their failures. She looked up, meeting her daughter's eyes directly. His response suggests a capacity for growth I wouldn't have credited him with initially. That doesn't answer my question, Mama. A hint of a smile touched Diana's lips. No, it doesn't. She tapped her spoon thoughtfully against the edge of her dessert dish. I've invited him to come to the restaurant next Tuesday night after closing. Sophia nearly choked on her meringue. You've what? If he truly wishes to understand what he dismissed so carelessly, then perhaps he should learn firsthand. Diana's expression remained unreadable, beginning with your great-grandmother's coq au vin. You're going to teach Gabriel to cook? Sophia couldn't quite process this unexpected development. I'm going to teach him about heritage, Diana corrected. Cooking is simply the medium. She studied her daughter's face carefully. Unless you object. The question hung between them, laden with implications. Diana was offering a path toward possible reconciliation, but leaving the choice entirely to Sophia. I don't object, Sophia said finally. But I don't understand. Why would you do this for him, for us, after what happened? Diana reached across the table to cover her daughter's hand with her own. Ma chérie, I've spent my life preserving traditions that matter. Your happiness matters more than my pride. She squeezed Sophia's fingers gently. Besides, a good chef knows when to stick to the recipe and when to improvise. The next morning, Sophia finally responded to Gabriel's note with a text message. Saturday, North Pond, 8 a.m. The morning arrived crisp and clear, with autumn's full glory painting the trees surrounding the pond in fiery hues. Sophia arrived early, wrapping her coat tightly against the October chill as she settled on a bench where they had once shared croissants on a carefree summer morning. She sensed Gabriel's approach before turning, the subtle shift in energy that had characterized their connection from the beginning. When he sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them, she noted the shadows beneath his eyes that matched her own sleepless nights. Thank you for meeting me, he said simply. Sophia nodded, gathering her thoughts before speaking. My mother showed me your letter. Gabriel's expression registered surprise, followed by understanding. I didn't send it expecting her to share it. That's partly why she did, I think. Sophia turned to face him fully. She's invited you to the restaurant for cooking lessons. I know, Gabriel confirmed. I received her note yesterday. I wasn't sure if you... He hesitated. If you would want me to accept. The question beneath his statement was clear. Where did they stand? What remained possible between them after the painful revelations at Maison Diana? I think you should go, Sophia said carefully. Not for me or for us, but because there's value in what she can teach you, professionally and perhaps personally, too. Relief flickered briefly across his features. And us? Is there still an us to consider? The autumn breeze stirred fallen leaves around their feet as Sophia considered her response. The hurt and betrayal she had felt upon seeing her mother's pained recognition of Gabriel had been real, but so too had been the months of connection they had built, the shared passion for food, the intellectual compatibility, the ease they had found in each other's company. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. What happened that night changed things between us, not just because of who my mother is, but because I realized how completely I'd been compartmentalizing my life, keeping you separate from my family, my heritage, parts of myself that matter deeply. Gabriel nodded, accepting her uncertainty, without pushing for more definitive answers. For what it's worth, I've been doing similar reflection about how my professional certainty became personal arrogance. about why I felt entitled to dismiss approaches different from my own without truly understanding their purpose. A pair of ducks landed on the pond's surface, sending gentle ripples across the water that caught the morning light. Their ordinary movement offered a moment of respite from the emotional complexity of the conversation. "Perhaps we both need time," Gabriel suggested finally. "You to decide if what we began building is worth continuing, me to understand more fully what your mother's heritage means to both of you." He looked at her directly, vulnerability evident in his expression. "I won't pressure you for decisions before you're ready to make them." The maturity of this approach touched Sophia deeply. There was no defensiveness, no attempt to rush past difficult truths for the sake of returning to comfortable patterns. "I'd like to keep talking," she said, offering what felt possible in the moment. "Not every day, not with the same intensity as before, but not silence either." Gabriel's smile held relief and tentative hope. "I'd like that too." As they rose to walk along the pond's edge, not touching but moving in the synchronicity that had developed between them over months together, Sophia felt something shift within her, not forgiveness yet, but the opening of a door that had seemed firmly closed in the immediate aftermath of that painful night at Maison Diana. The morning light strengthened around them, burning away the early frost and illuminating a path forward. Uncertain still, but visible now where before there had been only confusion and hurt. Like the most complex recipes in her mother's collection, this restoration would require patience, careful attention, and faith that seemingly disparate elements might eventually combine into something worth preserving. Chapter 7. The Family. Recipe. 2 weeks after their conversation by the pond, Sophia and Gabriel had settled into a cautious renewal of their relationship. They met for coffee, took walks along the lakefront, and shared occasional dinners, always in neutral locations, never at either's home. The physical dimension of their connection remained on hold by unspoken mutual agreement, both understanding that rebuilding trust must precede returning to intimacy. Diana had maintained her dignified distance, neither encouraging nor discouraging Sophia's tentative steps toward reconciliation with Gabriel. When Sophia mentioned meeting him for dinner, her mother simply nodded and changed the subject to upcoming holiday menu planning for the restaurant. On a Tuesday evening in late November, Gabriel called Sophia as she was leaving Eloise. "Are you free right now?" he asked, his voice carrying an unusual tension. "I just finished at Eloise. What's happening?" "I received a note from your mother," he said, the surprise evident in his tone. "She's asked me to come to Maison Diana tonight after closing. She was very specific about the time, 11:30. Sophia's pulse quickened. "Did she say why?" "No, just that it was important we speak privately." A complicated mix of hope and anxiety twisted in Sophia's stomach. "Do you want me to come with you?" There was a brief hesitation. Her note was addressed only to me. "I think this is something she feels needs to happen between us directly." "Then you should go," Sophia said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the uncertainty blooming inside her. The hours until 11:30 stretched endlessly. Sophia tried to distract herself with cookbook research for Eloise's winter menu, but her thoughts kept circling back to what might be unfolding between her mother and Gabriel. At 11:45, unable to concentrate any longer, Sophia bundled herself against the November chill and headed to a 24-hour diner near her apartment. The familiar brightness offered comfort as she settled into a booth with a cup of tea. It was nearly 1 in the morning when her phone finally vibrated with a text from Gabriel, "Just leaving the restaurant. Can I see you?" 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in the nearly empty diner, Gabriel's expression a complex mixture of emotions that Sophia couldn't quite decipher. "What happened?" she asked when the waitress had retreated. Gabriel wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. Your mother invited me into the kitchen after the staff had gone. She didn't say much at first, just handed me an apron and pointed to a workstation she'd prepared. A workstation? Sophia repeated. Confused, Gabriel nodded, a hint of wonder entering his expression. She brought out this old, worn cookbook, handwritten recipes bound in leather, with notes in different handwritings spanning what looked like generations. Recognition dawned immediately. Grand-mère Laurence's recipe collection, Sophia breathed. Mama doesn't let anyone touch that book. Even I have to ask permission. She placed it on the counter between us and said, If you wish to know my daughter, first you must understand our heritage. Gabriel's voice had softened in recollection. Then she opened it to a recipe for coq au vin that had notations dating back to 1937. For the next 2 hours, Gabriel explained, Diana had guided him through the preparation of the dish, not the restaurant's refined version, but the rustic, original that had sustained her family through war, immigration, and the building of a new life in America. As they cooked, she spoke of the significance behind each technique, the history encoded in seemingly simple culinary decisions. She told me about your great-grandmother substituting ingredients during wartime shortages, Gabriel continued. How certain techniques were preserved not out of stubbornness, but because they carried the memory of people long gone. How recipes evolved subtly with each generation while maintaining the core that connected them to their roots. Sophia listened, moved beyond words by her mother's gesture. This wasn't just cooking instruction, it was the sharing of their family's most precious inheritance. By the time we finished cooking, it was almost 3 hours later, Gabriel said. We sat at the small table in the kitchen and shared the dish with a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. She told me stories about you as a child in that kitchen, how you would stand on a stool to help stir sauces, how you could identify herbs by smell before you could read their names. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She showed you who we are, she whispered. Gabriel reached across the table to take her hand. She did more than that, he said quietly. She offered me a path to understanding what I had dismissed so carelessly. Not with anger or recrimination, but with the most generous form of education I've ever received. Gabriel described how, at the end of their lesson, Diana had walked him to the restaurant's entrance. She said something I'll never forget, he told Sophia. Tradition without evolution is stagnation, but innovation without respect for the past is merely novelty. The wisdom lies in knowing which elements must be preserved and which can be transformed. The simple profundity of her mother's words resonated deeply with Sophia. It was a philosophy that had guided Diana's cooking and her life through decades of challenges. What happens now? Sophia asked, the question encompassing far more than just the immediate future. Gabriel's expression grew thoughtful. Your mother invited me to return next Tuesday. She wants to teach me the proper way to prepare bœuf bourguignon. A smile touched his lips. I believe it might be the beginning of a very long curriculum. As they stepped outside into the grey light of early morning, Sophia felt a weight lifting that she hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. Her mother had found her own path toward reconciliation, not through words or apologies, but through the shared language of food that had always been the foundation of their family's communication. Will you come to the lake house this weekend? Gabriel asked as they prepared to part ways. I think we have much to discuss about the future. Sophia nodded, feeling for the first time in weeks that a future together might indeed be possible. I'd like that, she said simply. As they stood on the street corner waiting for their taxis, Gabriel pulled her gently into an embrace. The familiar solidity of him, the scent that had become synonymous with comfort, surrounded her like a homecoming. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman," he murmured against her hair. "Yes," Sophia agreed, thinking of the remarkable generosity of spirit that had led Diana to share their most precious family traditions with the man who had once dismissed them. She's always understood that the most important ingredients in any recipe are patience and forgiveness. Their taxis arrived within moments of each other. As Sophia settled into hers, fatigue finally catching up with her, she felt her phone vibrate with a message from her mother. "He has much to learn, but his hands show promise. Perhaps he can be taught after all. Rest well, ma chérie." Sophia smiled through sudden tears, typing back a simple response. "Thank you, Mama, for everything." As her taxi navigated the early morning streets, Sophia gazed out at the city awakening around her. The path forward remained complex, the wounds not entirely healed, but a door had been opened that had seemed permanently closed just days before. Like the most carefully crafted recipes in her mother's collection, this reconciliation would require time, attention, and the proper balance of ingredients. But for the first time since that painful revelation, Sophia allowed herself to believe that something beautiful might yet emerge from the truth they had all been forced to confront. Chapter 8. Renewed Connection. December had transformed Gabriel's lakeside property into a winter sanctuary. Bare maple branches stood etched against the pewter sky, their intricate patterns more visible now than when summer foliage had obscured their structure. The water's surface had darkened to slate, occasionally ruffled by wind that carried the promise of snow. Inside the lake house, embers glowed in the stone fireplace, suffusing the space with gentle warmth that contrasted with the gathering chill beyond the windows. Sophia stood at the glass wall overlooking the shore, watching light and shadow play across the water. 4 months had passed since their last visit here, that golden autumn weekend when they had cooked together and made love on the beach, when their relationship had seemed uncomplicated by the truths they now carried. She sensed Gabriel's approach before his footsteps reached her, a heightened awareness that had characterized their connection from the beginning. "Tea?" he asked, offering a steaming mug that smelled of cardamom and cinnamon. "Thank you," she replied, accepting both the mug and his presence beside her. The careful distance they had maintained during their initial reconciliation had gradually dissolved over the weeks of Tuesday night cooking lessons at Maison Diana, replaced by a deeper connection that acknowledged both the pain they had navigated and the potential that remained. Gabriel had approached those lessons with humility that surprised even Diana, absorbing not just techniques, but the stories and history behind each recipe. Sophia had deliberately kept her distance from these sessions, understanding instinctively that her mother and Gabriel needed to forge their own relationship, independent of her influence. "Your mother sent something with me," Gabriel said, stepping away briefly to retrieve a wrapped package from the kitchen counter. "She said it was time." Sophia accepted the familiar weight with surprise. Unwrapping the protective cloth revealed Grand-Mère Laurence's original cookbook, the handwritten collection of recipes that had traveled from France generations ago and had never left Maison Diana's kitchen in Sophia's memory. "She's never allowed this out of her sight," Sophia whispered, running her fingers reverently over the worn leather cover. "She said you would know what it means," Gabriel replied, watching her face carefully. Sophia nodded, emotion catching in her throat. In their family, recipes were never merely instructions for preparing food. They were histories, promises, inheritances. For Diana to entrust her most precious culinary heirloom to Gabriel's safekeeping, even temporarily, was a declaration of acceptance more powerful than any words could convey. "What does it mean to you?" Sophia asked, studying Gabriel's expression. He considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Recognition," he said finally. "Not just that I can handle the physical object with care, but that I've begun to understand its true significance beyond technique or instruction, that I see what it represents to your family, to you." The afternoon deepened toward evening as they prepared dinner together, moving with the synchronized rhythm that had characterized their kitchen. Collaborations from the beginning. There was comfort in this dance they had perfected, Gabriel handling protein and savory elements with precision that honored technique while introducing subtle innovations, Sophia creating components that bridged traditional and contemporary approaches to pastry. Over dinner, their conversation ranged across professional developments, family histories, and tentative plans for the future. There was an ease between them now that felt different from their earlier connection, less driven by the discovery of shared passion and more grounded in the deeper understanding that comes only after navigating difficulty together. "I've been thinking about something your mother said during our last lesson," Gabriel said, as they cleared the dishes together. "About how every generation adds their own perspective to the family's culinary heritage, without diminishing what came before. It's changed how I'm approaching the new restaurant concept." Sophia waited for him to elaborate, sensing the significance of this evolution in his thinking. "Instead of positioning tradition and innovation as competing forces, I'm exploring how they can illuminate and elevate each other," he explained, enthusiasm warming his voice. "A menu that honors heritage techniques while introducing contemporary elements that enhance rather than obscure the original intention." "That sounds remarkably aligned with what I've been trying to achieve at Eloise," Sophia observed with a smile. "Perhaps that's why we understood each other from the beginning," Gabriel acknowledged, despite approaching cuisine from seemingly different directions. The fire had dwindled to glowing coals as evening settled around the lake house. Through the windows, the first delicate snowflakes had begun falling against the darkening sky, transforming the landscape into something new, yet still recognizable, much like the relationship they were carefully rebuilding. As Sophia added another log to the fire, Gabriel approached with the measured certainty that had characterized his professional life, but had been notably absent from their personal interactions since the night of painful revelations at Maison Diana. "These weeks of learning from your mother have transformed more than my culinary perspective," he said, his voice carrying quiet conviction. "They've shown me how much I failed to understand about the purpose behind preservation, not just of techniques, but of connections between generations, of stories told through food, of knowledge that deserves protection precisely because it can't be replicated through innovation alone." Sophia nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I realized that my criticism at the awards ceremony wasn't just professionally misguided. It revealed personal arrogance and the danger of valuing theoretical progress over lived wisdom." He took her hands in his, the gesture intimate without demanding. "That understanding has clarified what matters most to me beyond career or reputation. And the clearest answer is you, Sophia. Not despite your family heritage, but including and honoring all it represents." The directness of his declaration hung between them, reminiscent of that perfect night at the lake house that now seemed both recent and distant, separated not by time, but by experience. "I love you too," Sophia responded after a moment, the words carrying certainty she had lacked in recent weeks. "That never changed, even when everything else became complicated." Gabriel drew her closer, allowing vulnerability to show beneath his usual composed exterior. "Where do we go from here?" Instead of answering immediately, Sophia led him to the sofa before the rekindled fire. When they were seated, she turned to face him fully, choosing her words with deliberate care. "My mother has offered you more than culinary knowledge," she began, She's shown you our family's heart. That's something she reserves for very few people. Gabriel nodded, understanding the significance of Diana's gesture. I think we create something new together, Sophia continued. Something that acknowledges where we've both come from while making space for what we might become together. Firelight played across their features. Their conversation yielded to a different form of communication. Their first kiss in weeks carried tenderness that transcended physical desire, an acknowledgement of the journey they had navigated and the deeper connection that had emerged from confronting difficult truths rather than avoiding them. Later, as moonlight filtered through windows, increasingly frosted with winter's crystalline patterns, they lay entwined before the fire. Sophia traced the contours of Gabriel's face with gentle fingers, seeing in his features not just the man who had first attracted her, but the person who had been humbled, who had learned, who had shown the capacity to evolve without losing his essential self. This feels different, she whispered, finding words for the transformation between them. Before, we were discovering passion together. Now we're choosing each other with clear eyes, Gabriel completed, understanding precisely what she meant. Knowing the complexity, the challenges, the work required. Their lovemaking carried none of the urgent exploration that had characterized their earlier encounters. Instead, each touch, each moment of connection seemed imbued with newfound awareness of the other's complete self, not just the person they had initially been drawn to, but the individual shaped by family, heritage, and all they had experienced together. Morning found them still wrapped in blankets before the rekindled fire. Grand-mère Laurence's cookbook opened between them as Gabrielle recounted stories Diana had shared during their weekly lessons. Sophia added her own childhood memories of the dishes, creating a braided narrative that connected past to present, melding their separate experiences into shared understanding. I have a suggestion, Gabriel said as winter sunlight strengthened outside the windows. Not an ultimatum or demand, he added quickly, just a possibility to consider. Sophia smiled, relaxing against him. What are you suggesting? Christmas dinner, Gabriel proposed. At my apartment in the city. You, your mother, myself, a meal we prepare together, each contributing something that represents our approach to cuisine. The symbolism wasn't lost on Sophia. Common ground where we each bring our distinct perspective, she observed. Exactly, Gabriel confirmed. Not Maison Diana, which carries the legacy of tradition, and not a restaurant connected to my investments, which would emphasize innovation. Just a private space where we can create something that honors all our viewpoints. As they prepared to return to the city later that morning, Sophia carefully rewrapped Grand-mère Laurence's cookbook in its protective cloth. The tangible representation of her heritage would return to its proper place in Maison Diana's kitchen, but the wisdom it contained had expanded beyond those walls, extending now to include Gabriel and the future they might build together. Standing on the shore for a final moment before departure, they watched snowflakes settling on the lake's dark surface, each crystal perfect and unique before dissolving into the greater whole. Gabriel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. The simple connection carried promise more meaningful than elaborate declarations, a commitment to continuing the careful blend of their separate lives into something that preserved the essence of each, while creating something entirely new. Like the most sophisticated recipes in her family's collection, their relationship now balanced complex elements with thoughtful intention, passion and contemplation, individual identity and shared purpose, past wisdom and future possibility. The difficult truth that had nearly separated them permanently had instead become a catalyst for deeper understanding than either could have imagined on that summer night when their hands first touched reaching for the same herb bundle at the midnight market. Chapter 9. Professional Redemption. The Chicago Culinary Center's grand ballroom sparkled with the same elegant chandeliers that had illuminated the award ceremony 10 months earlier. But for Diana Lawrence, the context couldn't have been more different. Instead of sitting at a nominee table nursing quiet hopes for recognition, she now occupied a place of honor near the stage, her dignified presence drawing respectful nods from industry colleagues who had witnessed her steadfast commitment to culinary heritage for over 25 years. Sophia adjusted the seating card at their table, anxiety fluttering in her stomach despite the months of healing that had transformed the original wound of Gabriel's public criticism into something approaching understanding. "Are you comfortable, Mama? We could request a table further from the stage if you prefer." Diana patted her daughter's hand reassuringly. "I've never been one to hide in corners, ma chérie. Besides, I'm curious about this announcement Gabriel has been so mysteriously preparing." Across the crowded ballroom, Gabriel navigated between industry colleagues with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to such gatherings. Yet those who knew him well might have noticed subtle changes in his demeanor, the listening more than speaking, the thoughtful consideration that had replaced his former rapid-fire judgments, the genuine interest in perspectives that differed from his own. The Winter Benefit Gala had grown into one of Chicago's premier culinary fundraising events, supporting educational programs for underprivileged youth interested in culinary careers. This year's theme, preserving tradition, fostering innovation, had raised eyebrows among those who remembered Gabriel's notorious dismissal of heritage-focused establishments like Maison Diana. "Morgan's gone soft," remarked Chester Holloway, a prominent restaurant critic known for his caustic reviews, as he passed the Lawrence women's table. "Used to be, he understood, that progress demands culinary evolution, not preservation of outdated techniques." Diana merely sipped her wine, neither acknowledging the barb nor betraying any reaction to it. Sophia, however, felt her tension increase. Despite the private reconciliation between Gabriel and her mother, the industry at large remained unaware of the personal journey that had transformed his professional perspective. Dinner service concluded with a seasonal dessert that ironically featured elements Diana had been preparing at Maison Diana for decades, a classic poire belle Hélène reimagined with subtle modern techniques. The foundation director took the stage to welcome guests and introduce the evening's keynote speaker. "Our culinary community thrives on passionate debate about the future of cuisine," she began. "Tonight's speaker has been at the forefront of that conversation, championing innovation while recently expanding his perspective to embrace the vital importance of preserving culinary heritage. Please welcome Gabriel Morgan." Applause filled the ballroom as Gabriel approached the podium, his gaze briefly finding Sophia and Diana across the room. The subtle nod they exchanged carried months of shared understanding, cooking lessons, and gradual healing. "Good evening," Gabriel began, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "Many of you know me primarily through my investments in boundary-pushing restaurants and perhaps my occasionally dogmatic opinions about culinary innovation." A ripple of knowing laughter spread through the audience. "What fewer of you may know is that I've spent the past several months reconsidering fundamental assumptions that have guided my career, particularly regarding the relationship between tradition and innovation in cuisine." Sophia noticed several industry veterans exchange skeptical glances. Chester Holloway's eyebrow lifted in barely disguised disbelief. 10 months ago, on this very stage, I spoke dismissively about establishments that prioritize heritage preservation over contemporary evolution," Gabriel continued, his candor drawing surprised murmurs. I specifically cited Maison Diana as an example of what I characterized as culinary stagnation dressed as tradition. The ballroom grew uncomfortably quiet as audience members recognized the unusual nature of this public self-critique. I was wrong, Gabriel stated simply. Not just professionally misjudged, but fundamentally wrong in my understanding of what heritage preservation represents in our culinary landscape. Chester Holloway's derisive snort was audible from several tables away. PR rehabilitation, he muttered to his companion, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Gabriel paused, acknowledging the skepticism with a small nod. I understand the cynicism. In an industry where strong opinions drive reputations and investments, admitting error seems suspect. So let me be clear, this isn't about popularity or image rehabilitation. He stepped from behind the podium, moving to the edge of the stage, as though seeking more direct connection with his audience. In the months since my misguided critique, I've had the extraordinary privilege of learning directly from Chef Diana Lawrence, not in formal classes or professional exchanges, but through the generous sharing of family recipes that have sustained generations through war, immigration, and the establishment of new lives in America. Diana's expression remained carefully neutral, though Sophia could sense the emotion her mother contained beneath her composed exterior. What I discovered was not resistance to evolution, but a profound commitment to preserving cultural knowledge that might otherwise disappear. Techniques refined over centuries, flavor combinations discovered through necessity and retained through wisdom, methods of preparation that connect us to our shared human history. Gabriel's gaze swept the room, unflinching even when it met Chester Holloway's skeptical stare. What Chef Lawrence and other heritage-focused culinarians understand, what I failed to recognize, is that innovation without respect for tradition often produces novelty without substance, while tradition without selective evolution becomes rigid dogma. The wisdom lies in discerning which elements must be preserved and which can be transformed. Sophia watched the audience's response shifting, skepticism giving way to consideration as Gabriel's authentic conviction became apparent. Even Chester Holloway had stopped whispering to his companion, his attention now fully engaged. This realization has transformed my approach to restaurant development and investment, which brings me to tonight's announcement. Gabriel gestured toward the back of the ballroom, where staff began distributing elegant folders to each table. My company is launching the Heritage Preservation Initiative, a grant program supporting establishments committed to authentic culinary traditions that might otherwise disappear in our rapidly homogenizing global food culture. As murmurs of interest spread through the audience, Gabriel explained the initiative's structure: substantial funding for equipment modernization, staff training, documentary preservation of traditional techniques, and digital archiving of recipes, all without requiring recipients to alter their core culinary approach. The first recipient, Gabriel announced, his voice carrying unmistakable respect, is Maison Diana, whose 25 years of preserving authentic Provençal cuisine represents exactly the kind of cultural stewardship this initiative aims to support. The spotlight shifted to Diana, who acknowledged the announcement with a gracious inclination of her head as applause filled the ballroom. Hesitant at first from some quarters, then growing more enthusiastic as the significance of the moment registered, Sophia reached for her mother's hand beneath the table, finding it steady despite the emotion of the moment. But this initiative extends beyond a single restaurant, Gabriel continued once the applause subsided. We're currently reviewing applications from establishments preserving culinary traditions from Peru to Portugal, Ethiopia to Estonia, all facing the challenge of maintaining authentic heritage while surviving in a marketplace that often prizes novelty over substance. Chester Holloway raised his hand, an unexpected intervention in the formal presentation. Gabriel acknowledged him with a nod, permitting the interruption despite the unorthodox nature of the question during what was typically a monologue. "This represents a complete reversal of your previous position on culinary evolution," Holloway observed, his tone balanced between challenge and genuine curiosity. "Why should the industry view this as anything other than a convenient pivot following the backlash to your critique of Maison Diana?" A tense silence fell over the ballroom. Sophia felt her mother's hand tighten momentarily around hers. The only sign of Diana's concern at this public confrontation. Gabriel regarded Holloway steadily, neither defensive nor confrontational. "A valid question," he acknowledged. "The simplest answer is that I was offered an education I didn't know I needed." He glanced toward Diana before continuing. "Chef Lawrence could have responded to my criticism with justified anger or professional disdain. Instead, she invited me into her kitchen and demonstrated through action rather than argument why certain traditional techniques have endured for generations, not because they resist change, but because they achieved a perfection that doesn't require it." Gabriel's voice carried a humility that surprised even those who had known him for years. The true measure of professional integrity isn't never being wrong. It's having the courage to acknowledge when we've been mistaken and allowing that recognition to inform our evolution. Holloway held Gabriel's gaze for a long moment before offering a small nod of acknowledgement. The exchange, witnessed by the entire ballroom, carried more weight than any prepared remarks could have conveyed. As the formal program continued, with additional speakers, Sophia observed her mother and Gabriel exchanging brief comments at a reception table where they'd been seated together for the remainder of the evening. Their conversation appeared comfortable, occasionally punctuated by Diana's rare but genuine smile. Whatever remnants of tension might have lingered between them seemed to have dissolved in the wake of Gabriel's public acknowledgement. Later, as the gala transitioned to its social conclusion, Sophia found Gabriel in a quiet alcove, away from the main crowd. "That was quite an announcement," she said, accepting the champagne flute he offered, "especially handling Holloway's challenge." "I expected worse, honestly," Gabriel admitted. "The industry thrives on strong positions. Changing direction is often viewed as weakness rather than growth." "Yet you did it anyway," she observed, studying his face in the subdued lighting, "publicly and without qualification." Gabriel's expression grew contemplative. "The seed for the initiative was planted during that first cooking lesson with your mother. Watching her work, seeing the precision and purpose behind techniques I had dismissed as outdated, made me realize how much knowledge is at risk of being lost as heritage establishments struggle to survive." "And my mother? When did you discuss this with her?" "Last week," Gabriel replied. "I wanted the program fully developed before approaching her, to ensure it wasn't just a gesture but something substantive. She insisted Maison Diana should be just one of many recipients, not the sole focus." Sophia smiled, recognizing her mother's characteristic humility. "That sounds like her." As they stood together watching the gathering, Sophia felt a profound sense of completion settle over her. The journey that had begun with painful revelations had transformed into something neither she nor Gabriel could have anticipated, not just the healing of wounds, but the creation of something valuable that extended beyond their personal relationship to benefit the broader culinary community. "I have something for you," Gabriel said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He withdrew a small velvet box, its presence immediately shifting the atmosphere between them. Before Sophia could respond, he clarified quickly, "It's not an engagement ring, not yet. I believe we still have more of our story to write before that chapter." Relieved and intrigued, Sophia accepted the box. Inside nestled a delicate pendant, a small silver chef's knife crossed with a sprig of lavender, both rendered in exquisite detail. "It's beautiful," she breathed, lifting it from its velvet nest. "The knife represents your culinary future," Gabriel explained, "and the lavender honors your family's heritage, both essential parts of who you are." As he fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin, Sophia felt the weight of the pendant settle against her heart, a tangible symbol of the balance they had worked to achieve. When Diana joined them minutes later, her gaze immediately went to the necklace. A subtle smile of approval curved her lips as she recognized the lavender's significance to their family history. "Your announcement tonight was most thoughtful," she said to Gabriel, her tone warm but dignified as always, though perhaps unnecessary. "Not unnecessary," Gabriel disagreed gently. "Overdue, and hopefully just the beginning of a broader industry recognition of what heritage-focused chefs contribute to our collective culinary knowledge." As the evening concluded, the three walked together through the winter night toward their waiting cars. The journey of reconciliation had unfolded not through dramatic declarations, but through a series of honest conversations, genuine learning, and purposeful actions that had gradually transformed conflict into mutual respect. When they reached Diana's car, she surprised both Sophia and Gabriel by embracing him briefly before turning to her daughter. "Your father would have approved," she said quietly, the simple statement carrying layers of meaning that brought unexpected tears to Sophia's eyes. As Diana's car pulled away, Gabriel turned to Sophia beneath the winter stars, his expression reflecting all the growth of recent months. "I never expected professional redemption to feel so personally meaningful," he said softly. Sophia smiled, touching the pendant that now rested against her heart. "My mother always says that the most authentic flavors emerge from honoring both tradition and thoughtful innovation," she replied. "Perhaps that's true of relationships as well." Their kiss beneath the starlight carried the certainty of a connection that had been tested by difficult truths and emerged stronger for having faced them. A promise not just of passion, but of partnership built on genuine understanding and mutual respect for the different perspectives each brought to their shared journey. Chapter 10. Hearts Entwined. Golden spring light bathed Maison Diana as the restaurant hosted a celebration that marked both professional triumph and personal joy. The familiar space, transformed with wildflowers and vintage photographs, held the history of three intertwined lives now moving forward in harmony. In the kitchen, the heart of everything that mattered to the Lawrence family, Diana, Sophia, and Gabriel worked in seamless coordination. The year that had passed, since truth shattered their separate worlds, had rebuilt something stronger in its place. Each brought their distinct approach to the meal they prepared together. Diana's reverence for tradition, Sophia's artful balance of heritage and innovation, Gabriel's newfound appreciation for techniques that had stood the test of generations. "The sauce needs more depth," Diana observed, dipping a spoon into Gabriel's reduction. Without criticism, she added a pinch of herbs from her garden, demonstrating rather than dictating. Gabriel tasted the transformed sauce, nodding with genuine appreciation. "The subtle complexity underneath, that's what I missed before," he acknowledged, the simple statement encompassing far more than cuisine. Sophia caught this exchange as she arranged delicate madeleines, the golden shells carrying the lavender, essence that had connected her family across oceans and generations. The platinum band on her finger caught the light, still new enough to make her heart quicken when she noticed it. 3 weeks engaged, and the wonder hadn't faded. The heritage preservation initiative that Gabriel had launched after learning From Diana, now supported 12 family restaurants, preserving culinary traditions from around the world. But today's gathering celebrated something more intimate than professional success, the joining of lives that had begun with chance, weathered painful truth, and emerged into something none could have imagined when their paths first crossed. At a midnight market, as guests gathered around tables where Diana had served diners for 26 years, the three moved together to present their collaborative menu. Each dish told part of their story: traditional foundations, thoughtful innovations, respectful evolution. The meal progressed like their journey, from initial brightness through complex development to harmonious resolution. Later, after their 40 guests had departed and the restaurant gleamed in post-celebration quiet, Gabriel led Sophia to the small herb garden behind the kitchen. The space held memories now, of lessons where Diana had first taught him to discern the subtle differences between varieties of time, of moments when understanding had begun to replace judgment. Moonlight silvered the newly installed garden, lights as Gabriel drew Sophia into his arms. The scent of rosemary and lavender enveloped them as his lips found hers with the certainty that comes from knowing every contour, every response, every unspoken desire. "Do you remember what you said to me when we finally came back together at the lake house?" He murmured against her temple, his hands spanning her waist with reverent possession. Sophia smiled against his chest. "I told you, I surrendered myself only if you knelt before my mother's forgiveness. And now I kneel only to honor what we've built together," Gabriel whispered, lowering to one knee on the garden path. From his pocket he withdrew not a ring that had already been given and accepted, but a delicate silver key. "The deed to the lake house," he explained as she accepted it with questioning eyes. "No longer just my retreat, but our sanctuary. The papers were finalized today. It's in both our names." Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes, understanding the significance. The place where they had first truly connected, then painfully separated, and finally reunited, was now officially theirs together, a symbol of their journey. "Stand up, mon cœur," she said softly, using the endearment her mother reserved for those most beloved. "We've knelt enough to the past. Our future awaits us, standing together." His kiss, when he rose to meet her, held the controlled passion of a man who knew the value of patience, of perfect timing, of heat precisely applied. Their bodies remembered each other, even as they discovered new responses, new desires that emerged with deepening intimacy. "Not here," she laughed breathlessly against his mouth. "My mother's herbs deserve more respect." "The lake house," he suggested, voice deepened with desire. "It seems appropriate to christen it properly as ours." The drive north passed in charged anticipation, their hands rarely separating, occasional glances exchanging promises of what awaited. Under moonlight streaming through familiar windows, they rediscovered each other with the unhurried attention of lovers who had transcended mere physical attraction. Their passion now carried the depth of complete understanding, each touch informed by knowledge of the other's past, dreams, and essential nature. "I never knew love could contain such complexity," Sophia whispered afterward as they lay entwined, her head resting in the hollow of Gabriel's shoulder, her fingers tracing patterns across his chest. "That someone could see every part of me, my heritage, my divided loyalties, my fears, and choose all of it." Gabriel's hand moved along her spine with tender precision. "That's what your mother taught me through every recipe she shared, that the most profound experiences emerge from honoring complexity rather than demanding simplicity." Morning found them on the deck wrapped in a single blanket. Watching light shimmer across the lake's surface, Gabriel held Sophia against him, his lips brushing her temple as they shared dawn's first moments. 2 months until we stand there," he murmured, indicating the perfect viewpoint where they would exchange vows before their closest family, "and bind our lives together officially." Sophia turned in his arms, her kiss tasting of promise. "Our lives are already bound," she whispered. "The ceremony merely acknowledges what we've already created." As sunlight spilled fully across the water, they whispered private vows to each other, promises crafted from the understanding that true partnership, like the most exquisite cuisine, requires constant attention, careful balance, and the courage to preserve what matters while embracing necessary evolution. In Chicago, Diana prepared for another day at Maison Diana, moving through mourning rituals established over decades. On her workstation sat a new photograph, Sophia between herself and Gabriel, 3 generations of culinary wisdom united in one frame. Beside it lay her grandmother's recipe book, no longer a closely guarded secret, but a living document with new annotations being added by hands she had grown to trust. As she began reducing stock for the day's first sources, Diana hummed a Provençal lullaby she had sung to Sophia as a child, the same melody she hoped to teach to grandchildren who might inherit not only recipes, but the wisdom that came from honoring tradition while embracing change. In that moment, separated by distance but connected by something more enduring than proximity, 3 lives that had collided through chance and conflict continued their transformation into a new kind of family, created not by birth but by choice, by forgiveness, and by the shared understanding that love, like the most treasured recipes, achieves its greatest potential when patiently developed, carefully tended, and generously shared.